Hey everybody, happy Wicked Wednesday and welcome to Shivers. This week we're headed back to Pennsylvania to talk about some of the paranormal and horror stories that I heard growing up and that I experienced firsthand as well. So, getting into some of the lore, I think many of us have grown up with campfire stories, with scary stories around the fire at night. And one of those stories for me has always been the Suskin Screamer. So there's a town called Suskin, for those of you who are not in Pennsylvania or familiar with it. And it's basically just backwoods. There's a lot of houses back there. There's great roads for driving, but it's just woods, lots and lots of woods. So one of the stories growing up was about the Suskin Screamer. And it was said that if you drive into Suskin, into the woods, and turn off all of your lights and put your windows down, then you would hear screaming. And if you continued to drive, then this ghostly figure would fly through the front of your car. And the story behind that was because apparently, I have no idea if this is true or not, but apparently there was a young boy that was riding his bike on the roads of Suskin, and because it's all backwoods and all dark, he was riding at night and somebody hit him. So he flew through the whole car, and that is why, as a ghost, that's what he does now. So if you drive in Suskin at night, be aware of the Suskin Screamer. There's another similar story that was told by my brother that apparently happened to him. And this was the story of a bride in Suskin. So one day he was driving in Suskin, very dark roads, there's no lights at night, and he saw this lady walking on the side of the road. So he pulled over. Again, Suskin's in the middle of nowhere. I have no idea where she's going. And he pulled over and said, "Do you need a ride?" She said, "Yes, please. I ran away from my wedding and just been walking ever since. So can you take me back to my parents' house?" He said, "Sure, not a problem." So she gets in the back of the car. They're chit-chatting. He pulls up to where she gave the address of, and gets out of the car, and there's nobody in the car. And the person inside of the house comes out and they say, "What are you doing at my house? Why are you here?" And my brother says, "Well, I picked up this girl and she told me to take her to her parents' house." And the man who walked outside started bawling his eyes out, crying, and said, My daughter died on her wedding night and a number of years ago. And so, like, how would you know that? So that's the story of the dead bride. There's been a couple other people in Suskin that have supposedly seen the dead bride and had similar stories and experiences, but no one's ever really driven to the parents' house. So I think that's really cool. And hopefully it's not made up from my brother, but I've heard that one a couple of times as well growing up. And the last story about Suskin itself as well is when you're driving on the main road in Suskin, there's a little bridge. And this is also a superstition in general, but it's said that when you drive over this bridge, you have to pick your feet up, or the trolls that live under the bridge will give you nightmares and horrible, horrible stories in your head because you kept your feet down while crossing the bridge. So that is a superstition in general of raising your feet when you cross over a bridge for the trolls that reside underneath, but it was also specific to the Suskin Bridge as well. So another story that I heard growing up is not location specific, but I think a pretty common campfire story, one about a bus. So the story goes that there's a school bus full of children it is now snowing, it is wintertime, and they are out of school early. The bus driver can't really keep the bus on the road, and so drives and gets stuck on the railroad tracks. The train comes and hits the bus and kills everybody on the bus. So the story goes that it is another wintry day and somebody is driving their car and they get stuck on the same railroad tracks. They then get pushed off of the railroad tracks. Their actual car picks up, catches traction, gets off the railroad tracks. This person then pulls over, checks their tires, checks their car, and realizes that on the back hood, in the imprints of the snow that is falling, are children's hands on the back of the car, as if the children from the bus pushed this car off of the train tracks. So, another fun story. A couple of stories now that I've actually experienced myself. So, growing up in Pittston, Pennsylvania, there was a primary center, which was just a school for first and second grade near our house. And we would go back there and walk in the woods, and there was a little playground back there, so we would have fun and just hang out. And nearly every day that we would go there at like 4 o'clock or so, we would hear this screaming, myself and my sister. I'm not making this up. We would hear just screaming in the distance. And we never really knew what it was. You know, as we got older, we started riding ATVs back there. Like, we would still hear it faintly in the distance, but logic starts to take over, and you just go, oh, well, you know, maybe it's a dog or a cat, and maybe the owner lets them out at that hour or something. After then, learning about skinwalkers will scream in the middle of the woods as if they are humans to hopefully attract people to say, like, oh, do you need help, whatever, and then they get lured there and they get killed. So I have since been back into those woods, heard the screaming again, didn't follow it, but I really do truly believe that there is some type of skinwalker or something in those woods that screams at nearly the same time every day. Or maybe the coincidence is just that we were in the woods. So either way, it is something creepy that I've never fully figured out. Another thing to talk about that I've experienced is there's an old tuberculosis hospital in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And this tuberculosis hospital I've talked about before is really cool to go see. It's all closed off to the public, but you can still sneak in, you know, wink, wink. And the grounds are huge. So they have the actual check-in area, they have the hospital itself, they have a crematorium, and then they have the back whole building sort of somewhat still intact. You can walk on the floors and things, and that is where the people would be in recovery or at least comfortably living. And so going to the tuberculosis hospital, you're able to kind of walk around, see mostly graffiti now, but the one time we went there during the day, saw it, experienced it, took pictures, and then we decided to go back at night. And so when we went back at night, we walked into the basement of that back building, the comfortable building. And it's pitch black. There's no lights back there. It's in the middle of the woods, basically. And everybody turned off their flashlights and just had videos going so that we would hear things or see anything. There's no real animals that we heard around. We didn't hear anything like that. And again, there's no light. So we're all standing dead silent in this basement, asking questions out loud, seeing what we could come up with. So it wasn't until later that we got home and we were listening to the recording of all of these stories. And in the background, you could hear what sounded like the oxygen machine or like a heart monitor machine going on, like boop, 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 in the back of the video. And we heard nothing. It's dead silent, middle of the woods. We heard nothing in person. So to this day, in terms of actual evidence that I have received from ghost hunts, that's pretty far up there. So I always recommend that, the tuberculosis hospital, for anybody who wants to go on a sneaky ghost hunt. And then the last thing to talk about for Pennsylvania hometown horrors is Centralia. So many of you know the story of Centralia. It is the town and the event that inspired Silent Hill. And it's a town over near Hazleton, where basically there were a lot of people whose family members were coal miners. And so these coal miners would work on the coal mines, and one day the coal mines caught on fire. And to this day, they are still on fire. So it is the ever-burning coal mine town. And they didn't know what caused the fire, so they evacuated the town. And so all these people's homes and their photos and their clothes and plates are still on their tables and everything like that. So it's a very eerie town to go visit. But Graffiti Highway is there, which is now, as of recent, closed off to the public because the ground started to give out a little bit. But Graffiti Highway was the very long strip of land where people would go and actually see the crack and see the smoke coming out of the coal mine. And that's the main road of Centralia. So that is really the story of Centralia. I think that Centralia is a super cool place to even just drive through, seeing the houses and seeing everything still on the tables and clothes still hung up. It's wild. And for it to be the place that inspired Silent Hill, such an iconic franchise, is incredible. So that is really the conclusion of the list of hometown horrors. If you have any hometown horrors, hometown campfire stories that you love and want to share, please comment below. Let me know, and we will certainly talk about them. But those are some of the things that I experienced and heard growing up. So hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Wicked Wednesday.